Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
I'm Ian.
Today we're talking about some of our most surprising albums of 2024. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So overall, I think 2024 has been a fantastic year for music, but there have been some albums where I've either been surprised that they were really good, or surprised how terrible they were, or even surprised that they even came out. I'm sure you were probably...
There's a couple, yeah.
I'm sure you're in the same boat also. The first album I'm going to talk about is one that I thought this was going to be a horrible album. And then it was released, and I think it's some of the band's best work in almost 20 years. And that's Half Album by NoFX. I know it's an EP, it's not a full album, but whatever. So this is like the third part in a trilogy of albums that the band did. So they were supposed to record and release a double album a couple years ago. And they did. They just recorded half of it and put it out as it was called single album. And then they put out a double album a year after that. And then they put out half album. But single album and double album, there's nothing worth listening to on it. It was really bad. I mean, I own them just because I'm a big NoFX fan. But when I listened to this, I had no expectations for this. And I think, like I said, I think it's some of the best stuff the band has done in almost 20 years. Ever since Wolves in Wolves Clothing, it's probably the last great album from the band. And I think that musically, I think this is more similar to that stuff than anything they've done since.
And this is the last stuff they're doing, right?
Yes, the band ended touring this year. I don't know. I'm not sure if they're going to record and release any more music after that. And I mean, if they don't, I think this is a great way to go out, at least.
That's good. So for me, one of the surprising things this year, it wasn't so much that we knew it was coming, but Saviors by Green Day, surprising. It was actually really good. After their last album, I didn't have much hope. I mean, they've never been a band that kind of rests on their laurels, so I can see that they would change things up. And they'd released a couple singles in between that album and this album that were decent. So I guess I shouldn't say I was surprised that it was good. My optimism was low, though. And it just turned out that this was a really good album.
I think the interesting thing about this album is musically, I think it's very similar to what they tried to do on Father of All. But I think the quality of the songs are just much better.
I don't know. I mean...
It's still more of like a garage rock kind of album,
right?
Which is what Father of All was. But I think
to me it seemed way overproduced, and
Father of All, it just seemed rushed to me because it seemed like a band that was just trying to get through their contract and get an album out. Whereas this one, I think they just were able to spend more time and actually put more effort into these songs. I think it's why I think it's their best album since probably American Idiot. So the next album is one that, this is an artist that I typically, I've not been a big fan of anything that he's done previously. So the artist is Jaden, and the album is When the Music Stops, came out earlier this year. So if you don't know who Jaden is, he got famous on TikTok back in like 2019, and he self-released a single in early 2020, and caught the attention of Travis Barker. Actually, Jaden was his first artist that he signed to his DTA label. So that's why Travis had a lot to do with his first album. I wasn't a fan of it, though. I know a lot of people really liked the album. It just sounded like a bad, almost like a paint by numbers early 2000s pop punk album. I didn't like anything off it. I didn't think there was anything really redeeming on it. And I didn't really think that this album was going to be anything different. And it's a completely different album. He's shown so much growth from the first album to this one. There's a lot more like straightforward rock elements to this album. There's like singer-songwriter or like acoustic stuff on this album. There's like pop elements. He's definitely shown that he's much more than what he did on that first album.
I never heard of him.
It's good. So, I will say that my wife even liked this album, and really? I didn't think she'd like anything like this.
So for me, the next one is really the only surprise of it was that I didn't know it was coming. And it's
actually no one knew it was coming.
Yeah, I mean it just was there all of a sudden, and it's No Name by Jack White. To me, I'm a huge Jack White fan. To me, I don't think he's really made a bad album. Maybe what is that? I can't even think of it because it's the one that always drops.
Yeah,
like
no,
Border House or Border something.
I always want to say Cider House Rules.
That's what always comes to mind too. But I didn't really like that album too much. It's at least listenable, but I always tend to skip over it. But this is more of a. We were talking before we were recording. This is more on par for me with Blunderbuss, which is like my second favorite Jack White album of all time, and that's including his White Stripes stuff. So this, even his last two releases were good, were really good, but this one I think is just, it's infinitely better, and I didn't know it was coming. That's like I said, there was no warning. I try to keep up with the news on new releases and stuff, but I didn't see this one coming.
No, he didn't. There was no announcement before he dropped the album.
Yeah.
So the way he dropped it, I believe that's how the rollout was he said, hey, in 2 days, go to Third Man Records and buy this album.
Right.
And the first edition of it was super limited. It was on like a plain white cover. And then like the next week they released the standard versions of it. But I think it's one of probably his best album he's ever released on his own. And it's more like at least in my opinion, it's more like a straightforward rock album. Like I think it's more reminiscent to what he's done with White Stripes than anything he did in his solo career. One album that I had pretty I shouldn't say high expectations. I had expectations for, and was really disappointed by, is Supercharged by The Offspring. So when the band released Let the Bad Times Roll, I thought that was a big improvement over the last couple of albums. So I had some expectations for this new one. And then when Supercharged came out, I listened to it, and it's almost like a bad tribute band version of The Offspring. It's kind of the best way I can put it. There are some okay tracks on it. I think the best tracks on the album are just kind of okay, though. There's nothing really stands out to me. And that wasn't really the case with Let the Bad Times Roll. There was at least a couple of standout tracks on that album, and I thought there was really nothing off that one.
See, I disagree. I really like Supercharged. That being said, I mean, I haven't really listened to their 2000s, 2010 albums. I really only kind of got back into them with the last album. Mm-hmm. And I really just listened to their 90s stuff. And obviously it's not anywhere near the quality of the 90s stuff, because no band would be. But I really liked it. I've listened to it a bunch of times. So this last one for me it's a good album. It didn't blow my mind. But
I thought it was a great album.
But what's surprising about it is that it actually showed up, because we've been waiting like 8 years for this album to come out. And it's Songs from a Lost World by The Cure. It's a good album. I mean, by every standard, it's a good album. It's not their best work.
I think it's their best album since Wish. But
that could be.
The funny thing is, the beginning of every year, we do a video about our most anticipated albums for that year. I have talked about this album for 3 straight years.
Right, because every year it's like, this is the year it's finally going to come out, probably.
This is the first album in 16 years. It's not what I think. I think a lot of people were expecting more of like an upbeat kind of album, and it's even for The Cure, it's a very dark album.
Yeah.
A lot of the album is inspired by Robert Smith's. He lost his mother, he lost his brother, so those two deaths I think played a big role in his inspiration for this album. And I think it's why it is so dark, but I think it's a great album.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's a really good album.
It's just surprising that actually finally came out.
Yeah, when the first single dropped, I was like, oh, okay, finally. But then in my back of my mind, I'm like, they'll release a single this year, and then maybe another single next year. Yeah. But it did. It finally came out.
I knew it was coming out this year because I heard 6 of the songs last year when I saw them on tour.
Yeah, but I think they've been touring those songs a lot lately.
No, it was just last
this year.
So the tour, the name of the tour last year was Tour of Lost World.
Oh, okay.
So I knew the album was coming.
Yeah, but still, it was like one of those things. Just finally. And I will say that a lot of times, whenever there's a long period of time where an album is being recorded and the anticipation for that album is building and building, a lot of times it tends to disappoint.
Yeah.
I mean, Chinese Democracy would be an example of that. Not that that's a bad album.
It's not.
But it's
not Appetite for Destruction.
Or Use Your Illusion. It's where Guns N' Roses would be if they'd released 10 albums in between those.
I will say that people that like to shit on Chinese Democracy, if you go back and listen to some of those tracks live now with Slash and Duff, there are a lot better versions than what they recorded with that band.
But just in general, like whenever there's a long period of time where an album is coming, the artist is talking about it, and every year goes by and it's not out, and we're still working on it. A lot of times it tends to be a disappointment. Yeah. And I would say overall this was not a disappointment.
No, not at all. Then the last album I have is an album that I was not expecting to like. And that is What a Fucking Nightmare by the chisel. So I am not a big fan of hardcore punk. And this is an English punk band started in 2020. And it's the lyrics on this and the music, I think, are deeper than a lot of other hardcore punk that I've listened to over the last several years. And this has like a really strong like blue collar feel to it. It's just it's when you think of hardcore punk, you don't typically think of like catchy melodic songs. And that's what this is. Like I said, I was just really surprised by it. You should listen to this one also.
I'm just thinking that because I haven't, and I'm going to now.
Yeah,
I'll probably listen to it on my way home.
Well, that's all we got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. Let us know what you guys think are some of the more surprising albums to you that you've come across in 2024. But like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning. Peace.